In the heart of the Okavango Delta, a vast and untamable territory, lived Sekekama, the undisputed king of the savannah. His name, whispered with reverence and fear by other lions, was synonymous with absolute power. For years, his coalition reigned over the plains, protecting every inch of conquered land with claws and teeth. The relentless sun cast long shadows over the scattered trees, and the warm breeze carried the scent of dry earth and successful hunts. Sekekama was no ordinary lion. His majestic frame, with a black mane that seemed to swallow the surrounding light, set him apart from the others. Each scar on his body told a story of fierce battles, and his presence commanded respect even from the boldest rivals. He was a born leader, not only because of his strength, but because of the sharp intelligence with which he guided his coalition. It wasn't just about winning battles. It was about ensuring the survival of his descendants and the continuation of his legacy. However, Sekekama's story was nearing its final chapter. Time, which spares no one, had begun to weigh on his broad shoulders. The nights grew longer, and the cold of the early hours penetrated his bones differently than in his youth. His coalition, which once stood out for its unshakable unity, was now beginning to face both external and internal challenges. As Sekekama patrolled his vast territory, always alert to any sign of threat, younger lions watched him. They knew that, despite his imposing stature, time was on their side. The upcoming battle would be their chance to prove their worth. But even in his old age, Sekekama remained a force of nature. He was more than just muscles and teeth. He was the embodiment of resilience, cunning, and leadership. The nights in the Okavango Delta grew increasingly perilous. The dry wind, which once gently rustled the bushes, now carried the unmistakable scent of tension. Sekekama sensed something different in the air, something that his years of leadership had taught him to recognize. The old king knew his enemies were approaching. Young lions, brimming with energy and ambition, awaited the perfect moment to challenge his reign. They were smart. They wouldn't dare confront him while he still possessed his full strength. But now, with age weighing him down, they saw a weakness that even he tried to ignore. Sekekama moved cautiously, his golden eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. He knew the battle was approaching. His brothers and sons, whom he had taught to fight and survive, were close by. Even with his coalition around him, he felt the responsibility resting solely on his shoulders. From a young age, Sekekama had learned that absolute power came with the burden of carrying all the fates that depended on him. And now, more than ever, he was about to be tested. The first signs of the attack came at dawn, when the sun barely touched the horizon with its orange hues. At the distant edge of his territory, hyenas, normally opportunistic predators, were strangely absent. Sekekama knew something was wrong. He moved toward the main watering hole of his kingdom, the place where many conflicts were resolved, with blood spilled on the sand near the wet edges. The rival coalition was there, just as he had predicted. They were not mere invaders. They were a well-organized force, led by a young lion with a vast mane and a defined musculature. This young leader, full of ambition, knew this was his opportunity to take the most coveted territory of the Okavango, the territory of Sekekama. The old lion could feel the power of the moment. The world around seemed to stand still, the air grew denser, and even the birds fell silent, as if they, too, awaited the unfolding of an epic battle. Sekekama stopped at a distance, observing his opponents. The young coalition was prepared for a direct confrontation. The new leader, brimming with vigor, paced back and forth, his eyes fixed on the king of the savannah, waiting for the moment to strike. Sekekama's brothers were by his side, ready to fight, but he knew this battle would be different from all the others. Age had robbed him of his agility, but the warrior's spirit still burned within him. The first charge came swift and brutal. The young leader advanced towards Sekekama with impressive speed, his claws gleaming in the rising sun. The impact between the two was deafening, a roar that echoed across the savannah. Sekekama, with his vast experience, managed to dodge the initial blow, but the force of the collision pushed him back a few steps. He had grown accustomed to winning with the sheer power of his strikes, but now he needed to rely more on his cunning than on his strength. The two lions engaged in a deadly dance, claws tearing through flesh and roars filled with rage and pain. Sekekama fought with all his might, but the young leader had the advantage of youth. Each blow seemed to drain more of the old king's energy, and he knew he could not sustain the battle for much longer. The ancient scars on his body burned with effort, and fatigue began to weigh on his movements. His brothers and sons watched closely, ready to intervene if necessary, but they knew this was a fight between kings. They could not step in without it being seen as an act of weakness. Sekekama was alone, as he had always been in the decisive moments of his life. The battle raged on for long minutes, which felt like an eternity. With every strike, Sekekama resisted bravely, but the young leader pressed him with relentless force. Blood stained the sand around them, and the old king began to feel the weight of time in his body. Even so, he did not give in. Every time he fell, he rose again, determined not to be brought down without a fight that would be remembered for generations. Finally, the decisive blow came. The young lion, in an agile maneuver, managed to knock Sekekama down, pinning him to the ground. The old king tried to fight, his claws digging into the earth in a final attempt to escape, but his body no longer responded as it once had. He felt the crushing weight of his rival on him, and in that moment, he knew the end had come. With one last roar that echoed across the savannah, Sekekama bid farewell to his reign. The young leader, victorious, stepped back, leaving the great king's body lying on the ground. Silence fell over the savannah as Sekekama's brothers approached, recognizing the gravity of the moment. The era of Sekekama had come to an end, but his legend would live on forever. Sekekama's body, the greatest king of the savannah, now rested on the land he had so fiercely protected. The sun, now high in the sky, cast its rays over the battlefield, illuminating the scars of the fallen leader. His brothers and sons, who had witnessed the battle with looks of respect and sadness, now surrounded the body. There was a mixture of emotions, mourning the loss of the king, but also the understanding that a new era had begun. The savannah, for a few moments, remained in deep silence. Sekekama's final roar still echoed in their minds. He hadn't just fought for his life, but for the legacy he had built. Every lion present knew that this was the passing of one generation to the next. The circle of life, which never stops, had once again claimed its due. The members of the rival coalition, after their victory, retreated, respecting the moment. They had achieved what they wanted, the fall of Sekekama. Yet, even they, upon seeing the great king defeated, felt the weight of history and the responsibility now placed on their shoulders. The new leader of the rival coalition, who had brought Sekekama down, paused for a brief moment, looking at the body of the former king. He knew that the battle won was only the beginning of his journey. The fight to maintain control over the territory would be relentless. Sekekama's name would forever cast a shadow over him and anyone else who attempted to rule that land. As the rivals retreated, Sekekama's brothers drew even closer. One of them, the eldest after Sekekama, let out a low roar, almost like a lament, and the others followed in chorus. This was the final tribute to the king who had led the coalition for so many years, a tribute to the lion who never surrendered, even when time and age began to take their toll. The loss of Sekekama was felt throughout the savannah. The hyenas, the elephants, and even the impalas all seemed to sense the shift in the air. The one who once dominated the plains with his iron claws was no longer there to protect his territory. The smaller beasts of the savannah, who had once lived under the shadow of the great king, knew that the balance of power had shifted. But Sekekama's death was not just the end of an era. It was also the beginning of another. His legacy, forged in battles and wise leadership, would live on through his descendants. His sons, especially the strongest and most promising, now had the responsibility of carrying Sekekama's name and continuing the reign of the coalition. The weight on their shoulders was immense, but the savannah would not wait. Threats were constant, and the new generation of lions would have to prove their worth quickly. Sekekama's eldest son, who had been by his side in the final battle, felt the impact of his father's death more than anyone else. He knew that, despite his father falling in combat, there was much to learn from his legacy. Sekekama had always taught that strength alone was not enough to lead. Intelligence, strategy, and the ability to adapt were essential qualities. Now, the young lion would have to put those lessons into practice. In the weeks following Sekekama's death, the coalition reorganized. There was new leadership, but the presence of the old king was still strong. His sons, led by the eldest, began to patrol the territory more frequently, reaffirming their authority over the land. They knew that rivals might test the defenses again, but they were determined to honor their father's name, showing that, although Sekekama was gone, his spirit still lived on in those he left behind. The young leader, Sekekama's son, had a dual responsibility, not only to lead the coalition but also to protect his father's legacy. The savannah was full of challenges, but he would not face these obstacles alone. His brothers were by his side, each bringing their own skills to ensure the survival of the coalition. He was not just a fallen king. He was a symbol of leadership and perseverance. Future generations of lions would hear his name, and he would be remembered not only for his strength, but for the wisdom with which he ruled. In the end, Sekekama's death marked the beginning of a new cycle. The eldest son, now leading the coalition, looked out over the horizon, feeling the weight of his destiny. The land was still steeped in the scent of blood from the battle, but he knew there was much more to face. Lions never rest, and the savannah never remains calm for long. New enemies, new battles, and new challenges lay ahead, but the young lion was ready. He remembered Sekekama's words, spoken in a moment of wisdom. The reign is not for the weak. Those who rule must carry the weight of responsibility, even when their claws are tired and their bones ache. A true king fights until his last breath, and his legacy lives on in every decision he makes. With these words in mind, the new leader of the coalition prepared for the uncertain future. Sekekama was dead, but his spirit would continue to guide his descendants, and his legend would live on forever in the vastness of the savannah. Hey everyone, did you enjoy the video? Subscribe to our channel, like, and share it with a friend.